Hey everybody, this is just going to be a really quick intro today. Today's video is going to be the second part of the How to Make Your Own Logo series. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave a comment below and don't forget to like this video. So let's get started. Okay guys, so right here is Adobe Illustrator. This is one of the three main programs that I use. I mostly use Illustrator that you can see here, InDesign, and Photoshop. All of these programs you can purchase at a month-to-month basis through Adobe, through the Creative Suite. With Illustrator is the one I'm really going to be focusing on today, and most of these skills you can use in InDesign, but honestly, over the past few months, I've been using Illustrator more than InDesign, and I used to use InDesign more than anything else, but I'm kind of switching that up a bit because I've learned a few more tips and tricks that makes Illustrator really good for creating logos. Right on the screen, you can see 6 logos I've made using either InDesign or Illustrator over the past. So right here you can see that there are a variety of different types of logos. Some of them are very font based like Alpha and Cub, Blush and Babes, and some of the other ones are a little more picture based. So when you're designing a logo, it's okay to not have it look very standard and just be a solid piece of text or just a picture. You can combine them, or you can just do text. This one has a little more than just text, but it's mostly text and a little bit of an image, or you can have more of an icon and or image and then a little bit of text. So the next thing I'm going to go over with you is kind of the basic tools you can use, and a lot of them are the ones that you can find here on either the left and some of them over the right, but I'll get to those right ones a little bit later. So one of the most important ones that you should really practice using is the pen tool. The pen tool is what you use to shape awkward shapes or trace any images that you want to use. What I do is usually I hand draw or maybe take reference photos or shapes, because sometimes some shapes are a little more complicated to do just kind of freehand like this. So the ones where it's not a standard shape, which you can kind of do squares and stuff in these programs, but all the ones here that you see, except maybe Blush and Babes and maybe this one right here, were hand done using the pen tool. So for example, say I have never created this logo. What you could do is say either maybe you uploaded it from your email or anything like that. Grab your pen tool by clicking on it. And so whatever shape you're using, you start in a corner and then you kind of go to the next point that you want. Right here, it's a little different because these are more straight lines, but when you get to a curve, you're going to do it a little bit differently. So if you want to get a curve, you make your point, you find where your next point is, you press and hold, and then you drag to whatever angle that you may need. So that's kind of how you get more of those odd random angles or curves that you might not get if you're just doing individual points like this. This is great when you're just doing flat sides or very geometrical shapes that are more square based, but if you're trying to get some really cool maybe cloud shapes, you want to do that dragging motion. The next tool that you're going to want to use is the type tool. The type tool is pretty much exactly what it sounds, is where you're going to be getting your fonts and typing any sort of information up. Right here you can see how it automatically populated the text box with placement, and it's what I assume to be gibberish because it's not something I would understand. So you can always remove the text and delete it, and then you still have your text box. So to be able to edit your text box, if it's not already up in your screen, you can always go to Window, go to Type, and then pick up the different bits and pieces that you like. You can do glyphs where you can kind of get some of those weird shapes, end dashes, different types of foreign letters that might not be English letters or whatever your primary language is. You can see here you got different types of numbers and symbols and different letters from different languages. And even some different sizes as well, because it looks like is it called subscript? I'm not sure, but you have some different sizes of a lot of different things here. So you have options, and then also you can go based off the different fonts that you have. So most computers are set up with having a variety of fonts. So let me show you some of the cool things that you can do to either test out or find the font that you might want. So I'm going to type my name here, and it's going to start off really small. So having your text box and everything open here, you definitely want to have character up because character is going to change your font style. So let's find a nice bold font. There's a bold one. But it's still in the center, and you want to adjust it. So let's make it a little bit bigger so you can see it. Okay. So right here is my name, and you kind of want to adjust some of the settings. So you want to go from character to paragraph, and then you have a little bit more options. So I'm today, just for example, going to center the text. Because usually, in most cases, and a lot of people just like being able to center their text. So right here you can see I centered the font in Salt Baked City Cakes. And also the imagination part of Shane's imagination is centered below it. So right now, we have Zelda set up right here. So some of the cool things you can do is you can have hyphenations. You can use hyphens if you are typing up. But I know when I type up text, I don't like hyphens. And when the hyphens are removed, you don't have to worry a word being split in half and it just moves an entire word to the next paragraph. So that's what I like to do. I don't want any of my things to look like it's from a newspaper, so I like turning this off when I'm typing, especially if it's like a paragraph. So here are the different options though when it comes to justifying your font. So depending on what you're doing and how you want to set something up, if you want it left justified, no problem. You just want to make sure whatever you're doing is balanced. But that is up to you. But for now, for example, I'm going to keep this centered. So let's go back to character. So most computers, if it's either Mac or PC, they have their standard fonts. You can always go online to find other fonts, such as going to DaFont or Font Squirrel, but just because a font is on the internet and is said to be free doesn't mean you're necessarily allowed to use it all willy-nilly. Sometimes you can just use it for personal projects as long as you're not making money off of the project, and in other cases you actually have to purchase the font in a different capacity to have the full version of the font to be able to use it in commercial situations or anything that would involve you using the font and making money off of that project. So just before you use any fonts that you find online that could be free on random websites such as DaFont and Font Squirrel, I've never had major issues, but I do my research before choosing a font. No matter how cool it is, it doesn't mean every purpose that you want to use it for is allowed. So whenever you find a font, go ahead, stick with it. And if you ever feel like you don't have enough fonts and you don't want to worry about finding the free ones online because you are concerned about the different ways you are or aren't allowed to use them, you can always purchase font packages online. Sometimes you can buy individual fonts, and sometimes you can buy packages that have hundreds of fonts. I did that in college because there were a lot of fonts that I did need to use and study being a design major. But that's all up to you. And sometimes if you really want to, you can technically make your own fonts if you really want. But that might be a little difficult sometimes because you could always shape a letter. And sometimes that's really fun if you want that particular style or a particular look. You can always go with the pen tool and create your font. This is me attempting to make a really quick C. But right there you have a C. You can always do that, but if that's not what you want, that's okay. But that's always an option. I did do that a little bit with the Shane's Imagination logo. This logo right here is a nonprofit, and the font itself is used based off the handwriting that the nonprofit was dedicated to. This nonprofit, it was dedicated to Shane, and I was provided his signature with his name, and I used that part for the title, and then I tried to mimic a similar style for the bottom part, which I did make myself. So you can do cool things like that when it comes to font, but it all depends on what you're doing. This one was supposed to be very, very playful, so that's the look that I gave it. These ones right here were a little more, these two right here in particular, were a little bit more commercial, so I made them a little more bulky, but easy to read, because when you're using a logo, if you're making it really big, you want it easy to read, but when you make it really small, you also want to be able to read it at that tiny size. But also, same thing, you also want the images to be visible, so you could still see the big wolf, but you could also just barely see the little wolf right there. But any smaller would be too small, but at that point, I don't think anyone would be making their logo that small, essentially. So at that point, that's pretty much some of the basics you really need to know about the font tool. There's always more little details about spacing and paragraph styles, but that's something that you can kind of just learn based off of experience, because there's a lot of these options that I don't use on a regular basis, but that's just because I have a particular style of doing things, and I have a particular way that I like to justify things, but that's all up to me. So if there's any additional questions that you do have, you can go ahead and leave a comment below, or you can send me a private message on any of my social media in regards to it, or you can hit up your good friend Google. Google has a lot of good answers and a lot of good choices as well if you ever have a question about different tools within some of these programs. The next tool that I'm going to be talking about is the shape tool. So right here you just see the square, but you can always change it to a couple different shapes. Right now I'm on a PC. I normally use my Mac, but when doing videos I use my PC. So I'm going to show you right here how you can change the shape. So I went from a square to a circle. So right now the circle is activated. So right here you can see that you're making a circle. If you want it a little bit more steady or even, you can press shift on the PC and you'll get a more steady circle. If not, you can do a little bit more freehand. But later in the video, I actually will go over key commands that will allow you to do other things, but just hold on tight and I will get to those. So right here's a circle, but then if you wanted to go back to a square, you can press Alt if you are on a PC. Right now it's the Ellipse tool. Here's different shapes. You can see that it's changing to a star, a line, and a square. So here's our square. And if you ever want to change these shape colors, you will come over here to the fill box. You can double click on it and you can choose whatever colors you want. So right now I kind of turned it into a seafoam green, and if I want to use a line, I can do the same thing. It's still seafoam green, but there's the line right there. If you ever want to make these lines bigger, you can always change the stroke. So the stroke is pretty much the thickness of a line. So let's find the strokes. Okay, so right here is the stroke setting. So right now it's kind of either the smallest setting because it's not even registering. So it's registering that the stroke and the line have been made, but it's kind of still invisible because you can see that it's not showing up. So if you highlight this line, the line of stroke, and then you change the weight of it. So from here you would start to give it the stroke. And if you ever want to change the color of the stroke, this would be like the fill section, but then if you click on whatever this bottom or the right section, you can see how it's a square, but it's not completely filled in. That would be filled in. This is just the outline, so the stroke. So if you want to change the stroke color, you could either go off of settings over here, or you can double click on this as well and then adjust the stroke. So let's do a red. So there we go. See? You just changed the stroke color. So a lot of these tools are pretty simple. You just kind of have to know the little itty bitty details to get them down, because once you get them down, you'll use them pretty quickly. Some other tools that you can use that you can also use in InDesign and Photoshop. All the tools that I've actually showed you are also in InDesign and Photoshop, but they are mostly used in the same way as InDesign. Photoshop is slightly different, but they still have the same tools. So some of the other tools that you could also use, Eyedropper. You can click on a color and then you can see how it has now selected that color. And then if you made a shape, let's see if it actually makes the shape. So let's change the line to a shape, and there we go. So if you ever want to change it again, you don't want the orange, you want a yellow, do the eyedropper. There we go, we got a yellow, got a black, got a white, got a blue. So the eyedropper sometimes is like the quickest way to change some of the colors if you want to truly match the colors. What I like to do is actually I'll go online or I'll pre-select the colors I want to use, and then I will have a panel of different colors already here. So if I want to have multiple colors, but I want to use the same ones and I don't want to have to do all the adjustments all the time, I will have the swatches. That's what it's called. It's going to be the swatches will be up here. Sometimes I'll take a screenshot of swatches, just like paint swatches you'll find. They'll kind of be all different shades next to each other or complementary shades. And then you can put those swatches you find online up here in the corner, and then you can just, like, if you want to take a solid shape and change the color, you can just go doop, pick it up, change the color, pick it up, do that. It's not changing it now, but if you click on the shape, then you click on the eyedropper, then you can pick up the color. Sometimes it's a little tricky. Sometimes something deselects and you don't realize it, but that's how you use the eyedropper. One of the last major tools I'm going to show you that I use no matter what is actually there's actually two of them. It's layers and a ruler. They really don't have anything to do with each other, but those are two that I use almost every time. Ruler will literally just be a ruler on the top and on the left side of your screen. So let me try to get the ruler up. Okay, so right now I just have my page set up to points. You can always change it to inches, but right now I just have it kind of set up to points or picas. I'm not sure which one it is. So if you use your ruler, you can click on it and then a little line will drag. The point of these little lines is to help you kind of keep things right at the level that you want. If you want something at 228 and at this 140 area, you can do it, especially if you have to have an inch at the top, an inch at the bottom, or 5 inches here, 5 inches there. This is a good way to keep yourself in the space that you want to. And you can also just kind of square something in just like this, or just use them as guidelines. If you don't want to put anything on 3 inches on the bottom of something, you just kind of go 3 inches off of wherever you're at or whatever your settings are. So the ruler is something I would say use all the time. Even if you don't mean to use it, it's something that you should get used to having there, because it is a lifesaver sometimes if you're trying to get things balanced. Sometimes, and if you have it set up, when you move something around, if the settings are turned on, that's something you might have to dig a little bit more, because it is a little different on every computer or depending on what version of the Adobe software that you're using. But you see how there's a purple line in the middle and on the side there? This is an indicator to tell you if you're centered or where your alignment is. So I'm going to try to find the center of this page. So you can see how it's going. You're going to try to find it. So right here, I would say would be pretty center. It might not be 100% true just because I don't have all my settings set up for this file, but you can kind of see what I mean by trying to get things lined up if you really wanted to. So the rulers is a great tool. That next one I was also talking about was the layers. You can see how right now we just have one layer. But if you go to the bottom, you can always add more layers. So create new layer. So over here, you can see there's layer 1, And there's layer 2. So all of this stuff that we have worked on are on layer 1. You can lock it. That means when you click on it, you literally can't move it. So that's kind of a safety thing you can use if you're using multiple layers, because if all your layers are unlocked, even if you're working on layer 2, you could accidentally make adjustments to layer 1. So if you don't want to make any changes, make sure your layers are locked. You can also hide your layers. So if you click on this little eyeball right here, the toggle visibility one, you can click on it and then everything goes away. It's not permanently gone, it's just kind of hidden, because sometimes when you have reference photos or other examples in the back and you want to see your progress, you almost want to hide the sketches and everything that would be behind, and then whatever you're working on level 2, layer 2, you can kind of see where your progress is, because sometimes when you're tracing over one of your hand drawings, it can get a little hard to see. So that's kind of how the layers work. You can edit them, you can fade them, sometimes you can work with opacity, but you could all work on that based on your own time and depending on the type of project that you're working on. So I think I mentioned earlier some other things that you can use, and they are shortcuts or key commands depending on what you call them. Right here, this is from the Adobe website of some of the popular shortcuts and some other ones that you can use. There's ones for Windows and then there's ones for Macs. I do work on both systems, but I do use a Mac more for designing, but most of my video editing and anything dealing with streaming is usually done on Windows. So I do have both options available. So if you ever want to look this up, you can just kind of Google it and you can find them. I don't use half of these, but they're there if needed. Most of the ones I use are pretty much involving adjusting font size just to make it a little easier, changing just minor things like copy, cut, delete, paste, stuff like that. So a lot of the ones right here are the ones that I use. So if you want to pause that and take the notes down or Google it yourself to see which ones you would really use, these are just really good things to use. And once you get used to the programs and you get used to these shortcuts, you almost use them. You actually, honestly, you end up using them more than you even realize, because then they just become habit. But for those who are watching this, I hope some of these tips are a little helpful to you if you are trying to design your own logo. I know it won't be easy at the beginning if you've never used any of these programs or some of these tools before. It took me time too when I was just getting into design at the end of high school and the beginning of college. Just take your time, practice, and you'll get there. Some tips that you can do when designing it, or just things to keep in mind when you're working on a logo or just anything to deal with design. Don't rush yourself. You really want to give yourself enough time to work on something, because you can either make mistakes or you might make something you truly don't like just because you want to have something now. Pre-plan. Give yourself the time, because you don't want to have to change your logo every year. Sometimes after the first logo, you do change it to a second logo, but after those initial phases, you really want to stick to a logo long term, because your branding is a representation of you. So try to get at least some sort of branding down pretty early on, and then you can slowly evolve it over time. But you don't want to be consistently changing your logo on a week-to-week, a month-to-month, or even a yearly basis. Give yourself a little bit more time to create something that you truly love, that truly identifies with you in the way that you want people to see you. Also, some things to think about is the type of files that you might need. Depending on where you're going to be using your logo, you might use it online. You might want to place it on a flyer. You might put it on your banner, or you just might put it on one of your social media pages. There are a couple different types of files you can create. Just for example, with Illustrator, you can go to File, you can go to Save As, but right here as Save As in Illustrator, you can do just an Illustrator file, PDF, EPS, and then some of these other ones that I've honestly not actually used. PDF is really good if you want a high quality photo, but you can't always actually upload those onto your social media. There's just, I don't know what it is about it, but JPEGs are what you want to use if you're trying to use it for social media. So if you want to do that, you can go to export in Illustrator and export as, and then PNG is one you really want to use because that has a transparency, and so does TIFF. That means if you saved these files and you had no background, it would just be your logo and you won't have that awkward white box around it like you would with a JPEG. If you want to make your logo your profile picture, JPEG is what you want to use because you don't want to have a transparent background because that's not what those are used. So for an example, this file right here for Shane's Imagination is a JPEG. These right here, the Salt Baked City Cakes, Blush Babes, Alpha and Cub, and my logo are all either TIFF or PNG. You can see how they don't have a background. So this would be good for like a profile picture, but these right here you can actually layer on another image. Let me unlock this layer and see. So if you were creating something for Instagram or creating a banner for Twitch or Facebook or whatever you're doing, you can take it and you can layer it on top. Let me actually move it, arrange forward. But say you have a really cool picture you're posting on Instagram, you can do the same thing that's right here. Right here is almost an example of a image that you can use on social media. It has some text in the background, but then the logo pops out and then you have some text. So yeah, those are some other things you should and can think about, and depending on where you're uploading or how you're using them. Okay, so we are at the end of today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. Feel free to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel here on YouTube. You can also reach out to me and follow me at I am Zelda Lee at Twitch, Twitter, and Instagram. But my other Instagram is designs_by_Zelda Lee. That is the one where I post most of my art stuff. All the other stuff is a little bit more social, but thank you for getting to the end of my video. If you have any questions in regards to the video, like I said, you can reach out to me here or on social media. I know sometimes I might not be the most clear, or maybe I skimmed over something too quickly, or maybe you just really want to hear more details. I could also maybe send you some other resources that I also use. So I hope you guys create some awesome logos, and I will see you in the next video.